everyone, and welcome to the inaugural podcast for Shade Tree Cardiology. For our very first episode here, I wanted to address a topic that has been brought up to me quite a bit recently as I have been teaching several types of classes which are, aimed at cardiac resuscitation. So things like cardiology classes, ACLS, PALS, CPR. And I get a very common answer when I ask a question. And I want to ask you guys the same question and just have you in your mind. Tell me what your answer is, okay? What does a defibrillator do? So if you're not in the advanced cardiac life support realm of things, you can think of it as an AED, that's fine. But what does an AED do? What does a defibrillator do? The most common answer I receive is it restarts the heart, right? That's what they've kind of always told you. Every 2 years, we're going to recertify in one of these things, and they're going to say, oh, well, it restarts the heart, right? Even to the point that that's pretty close to an answer on one of the exams in those classes. Well, let me state it openly and plainly. AEDs, defibrillators, do not restart the heart. That is not what they do. That is never what they were intended to do. A defibrillator, a jolt of electricity, 200 joules, 300 joules, 360 joules, does not restart the heart. It stops the heart. That is its intended purpose. A uniform, electrically induced depolarization. You can think of it like electric adenosine if that suits you. The fact of the matter is, for years, this line has been sort of peddled out to the point that it's become one of those accepted concepts of institutional inbreeding where people say, oh, it restarts the heart, it restarts the heart. That's not what it does. That's never, ever been what a defibrillation does. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. One of the core concepts of ventricular fibrillation is this randomized depolarization. All over the heart, everything is going crazy. The cardiac myocytes are using that very unique quality of automaticity to depolarize when they feel as though they're not getting the energy or the perfusion that they want. And when several different cells or groups of cells, those ectopic foci, are depolarizing in different directions at different times without any uniformity, without any syncytium, we can't get blood flow. This is the core concept of why ventricular fibrillation will never ever produce a pulse. So how do we correct that? Well, we have two main ways. One is that we can administer intravenous dysrhythmics, right? So that's what amiodarone does. It acts on all cardiac tissues, slowing down electrical transmissions to try to stop these crazy cells, these cells that are sort of in panic mode, from being able to do all of this depolarization at random times for no reason. And this is in the hopes of restoring syncytium. But it's often used in conjunction with defibrillation. So what we're attempting to do here is completely stop the heart. One of the best ways I can outline this concept is if you're trying to get a band back into rhythm. If you have several members of a band, marching band, rock band, whatever the case is, and they're all in a different part of the song, it doesn't produce symphony, it produces cacophony. Nobody is making anything that resembles music when you put all these pieces together. So how do you get everyone back in line? You halt the band, you stop the music, and you count off again. That is the main point of defibrillation. What you want to do is completely stop transmission of electricity through all of these cells. And when you do that, if the heart has enough perfusion, if it has enough of the resources that it needs, it will automatically restart. And this is the entire concept behind defibrillation. This is also the reason we go straight back to compressions. Now, defibrillators in the past have not been as well understood as maybe they are or were supposed to be. The days when I cut teeth was back when we were delivering 3 sets of 3 stacked shocks without providing compression. So that sort of dates me, but the truth is the truth. So there is a huge problem, a huge disconnect with people not understanding this concept. This is the reason we go straight back to compressions. This is the reason that you supply 200 or 300 joules to a person, and immediately after the shock, you go straight back into compressions. You're hoping to pump that fresh blood in there to allow the heart to have the resources that it needs to do what it needs to do. And hopefully that makes sense to you guys. So with all that said, there's one exception to that rule. right? And that's the witnessed arrest. So the witnessed arrest is sort of a funny thing. The concept here is that the patient did have a heart that was beating, probably ischemic, probably injured, right? Right up until the point that they could not supply enough oxygen, or a PVC falls in the wrong place, or whatever the case is, that it induces pulseless ventricular tachycardia or ventricular fibrillation. And when this happens, we can often supply a shock, uniformly depolarize the heart, which in itself can actually produce a pumping motion of blood, right? It can actually supply new blood, because when the heart contracts, as soon as it relaxes, new, fresh, whatever you want to call it, blood comes back into those coronary arteries. So in the case of the witnessed arrest, where you're sitting there and you're talking to your patient and then they pass out, right? They become glassy-eyed and the monitor starts to beep and go crazy, and you note ventricular fibrillation, say, on the monitor. You dial up a really quick defibrillation, you shock, and you see what happens. And very often this will restore a decent cardiac rhythm, but it's not the defibrillation that is restoring it. The defibrillation is stopping the heart. The heart is doing the rest of it on its own. And then, of course, if it doesn't restore a decent rhythm, what do? You go straight back into compressions, or in the case of the witnessed arrest, you go straight into compressions. This is a core concept that I think a lot of people misunderstand, usually due to bad instruction, and you can't really place all that fault on the instructors. This is a pretty clear-cut case of what is commonly called a training scar or institutional inbreeding, where it's been taught this way for so long and witnessed so very little that people don't get into the nuts and bolts of it. They don't understand it. So hopefully, for this first episode of the podcast, we've had a chance to kind of clear up one of the things that you may not have even known that you didn't know. And it is my sincere hope that you will get out there and spread this stuff to everyone else so that they will better understand it. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Get out there and practice.
Chest pain.
Views expressed in the Shade Tree Cardiology podcast are solely those of the creator, and they're not intended to reflect on any institution or agency specifically. However, the claims made here are easily sourceable or already sourced in the notes by evidence-based medicine and legitimate studies. It is up to you to practice effectively using the direction of your protocols, evidence-based medicine, and your medical directors.